Since the dawn of this game, since the first D20 was flung across a table or behind a Dungeon Master screen, there's been one question, one debate that has driven more screaming matches in this hobby than anything else. Should a Dungeon Master fudge their dice rolls? Or more broadly, should a Dungeon Master fudge the numbers in general? Hit point amounts, damage modifiers, things like that. Should a DM massage the numbers for a variety of reasons? Well, I'm going to get into 2 reasons that I think it's okay for DMs to do so and 2 reasons that I don't think DMs should ever do it. But I'm also going to offer some alternatives in those instances where I think it's okay for a DM to fudge dice rolls or fudge the numbers, because I don't think you have to. It's a great shorthand, and if you're caught off guard, sure, maybe massage the numbers a little bit. But if you don't want to, that's perfectly fine as well. It's about having trust with your players. If your players trust that you as the Dungeon Master, that your goal is to ensure that everybody has a compelling and enjoyable time at the table telling a collective story together, then your players are going to be fine with it, generally speaking. But if it's more about winning, if it's more about trying to gain the upper hand or show your players who's really boss at the table, well, then you've got some bigger problems when it comes to how you run a table. But that's not for this video. Anyway, let's get into the reasons why you should and should not fudge dice rolls and some alternative ways of thinking. So I'm going to alternate and go back and forth on the pro, con, just to keep things spicy, you know. So the first reason why I think it is okay for a Dungeon Master to fudge dice rolls is if you've made a mistake. If you designed the encounter and you put a couple too many monsters in there, or you didn't put enough in there, or maybe you designed all the encounters and one of your players canceled last minute, and so all of your encounter balancing is just out the window. Then, you know, it's understandable if the party is greatly outmatched due to just the sheer number and it was a screw up on your part, then you can correct it through changing numbers, maybe shaving some hit points off of the monster's max, or a few times when they would have rolled a critical hit, making it a normal hit or a miss altogether. Those instances I think are perfectly fine and understandable, even from the camp that think you shouldn't fudge dice rolls ever. I think they can at least have a certain level of understanding that, sure, you're just trying to make sure that the players have a balanced and fair and enjoyable time at the table, and as a DM you screwed up and you're trying to correct that. What you should do instead, though, if you can, and this requires a bit of experience as a Dungeon Master, I would say, find opportunities where reinforcements can show up in an encounter, or we talked about morale rules in the DMG variant rules a few videos back. Utilize those. Find the point at which some of the monsters will flee if you've thrown too many at the party, or who is going to summon reinforcements if you've underbalanced it and made it too easy on the players and they're just not having an engaging time. Because that's the thing, is a imbalanced encounter becomes not fun. Even if the party is wiping the floor with the monsters, it still isn't enjoyable if they're just greatly outmatching who you've thrown up against them. So finding those opportunities to call in reinforcements or have monsters flee is a much more narratively satisfying way and mechanically satisfying way to alter the tide of battle. And this can be true for a variety of instances, but we're primarily talking about if you've made a mistake in balancing the encounter and you realize you should have added 2 or 3 more goblins to the encounter, have them run in after the 3rd or 2nd round of combat, and they can swing the tide back in favor of the monsters. But before we continue, if you are enjoying this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and also head on over to the Discord, link down below if you want to discuss these videos or just tabletop gaming in general. We have a lot of channels over there. I posted stuff about the food I was cooking today. I grilled some ribs and they were great. Well, smoked some ribs. Anyway, yeah, it's a great community and we would love to have you over there. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/thegeekpantheon. If you want to go support the channel and the videos that I try to create over there, you can do so, and that is very wonderful and kind of you. The first reason why you should not fudge dice rolls is for the sake of balance. And what I mean by that is balance of the dice. Listen, hot dice are part of the game. Some nights you're not going to be able to roll below a 17 and your players just can't get out of the single digits. And that's the way the dice roll. Or the inverse happens where your players are just critting time and time again and your monsters can't get a lick in. There is the temptation to fudge the numbers in order to give a sense of balance and back and forth to an encounter. And I understand that impulse. I have fallen victim to that impulse before. But some of the most fun nights of D&D that I've ever had on both sides of the screen are when the dice just go crazy. I've had encounters where I legitimately did not roll above a 3. And sometimes I was rolling with advantage and I just couldn't do it. And it was hilarious. And yeah, it was a little frustrating, but you know, it's still a game. And I was having a good time with my friends, seeing the way that they reacted and seeing how awful my dungeon master felt on my behalf of just, I can't hit anything. And he also was rolling super high. So even when I tried to, okay, let's make them roll for a change, give me a saving throw, I rolled a natural 16. Well, great. And it was fun. It was fun to live in that frustration and make it a ridiculous thing because it's nobody's fault. The dice are random. And so allow the randomness to enhance your game and make it fun. If your monsters can't roll above a 3 or a 5 or whatever, they just can't hit, announce that to the players. Let your frustration show in a fun way, not in a legitimately angry way. And so many times I've been behind the screen when either my dice are rolling super hot or rolling super cold, where I've just thrown my screen away because I do roll behind a screen just to add some tension. And so I'll just get rid of my screen or just start rolling with the rest of the players on the table. It's like, you all have to see this. And my luck will continue and it just becomes hilarious at the table. So don't fudge numbers for the sake of dice balance because the randomness is part of the fun. Okay, the second reason why I think it is okay to fudge dice rolls is for narrative satisfaction, tying up storylines, bringing things to a satisfying conclusion. And what I mean by this is if the party is fighting against the end boss of one of the player characters' side quests, you know, it's the person that killed their family or their rival or whatever, and you're in combat and the rival is down to, or the villain is down to just a handful of hit points. And let's say it's the paladin that is the player character, that this is their side quest. This is their story and the person that they want vengeance on. And the rogue has the turn right before the paladin and the rogue gets a critical hit. And also they have 5d6 sneak attack damage. And you know that they could roll ones on all of their dice and it is going to kill this villain in kind of a narratively unsatisfying way. It is totally understandable to, you know, just once the damage is calculated and you look at the hit point total, you just mark out whatever hit points they had and you write a 1. You just take them to 1 hit point just to get them to the next turn so the paladin can have the killing blow. And that, I've done that before. Straight up, I've done that in the past decade. I have done that at a table. And that's why I think it's okay. But I have another suggestion. First off, don't treat 0 hit points as death. Treat it as incapacitation. Treat it as bleeding out to where, you know, the rogue gets the final blow in combat. But, you know, narratively describe it as them like disarming the villain, like bringing them low and helpless to where they can no longer fight back. And then the paladin can step up and have their narrative moment with their villain. And if they want to take the killing blow, they can narratively. And do it that way. Play it that way. Play it in the narrative space as opposed to the structured combat encounter space. Because that yeah, you can shift the story in that direction. And then on the inverse, if you have the player characters about to be wiped out by some inconsequential combat, if once again we're talking about the bad dice heat and coolness, and it's just completely making a TPK a possibility, and you have like 6th level party that's going up against like some kobold mooks and they can't do anything against them. So rather than having a TPK occur in that instance, just have the kobolds capture the party, have them be knocked out, have the villains stabilize the party members as soon as they go down, showing like, we're not trying to kill you, we're just trying to subdue you. And then you have a new quest, you have a new compelling narrative journey to go on, as opposed to a TPK, because the dice were just not cooperating with you that night. So rather than fudging things and saying, oh yeah, they roll, oh no, all their luck ran out, now they can't hit you, and now nobody can hit each other, just allow the dice to tell the story that they're giving you and roll with it. Also, if it's a villain that you don't want to die yet, because I think every Dungeon Master has had that one villain, that one evil NPC or just antagonistic NPC that you had so many grand plans for, and the first time the party fights them, they just die. Like, because the party, like, just the dice were so hot and they couldn't do anything, and the sentinel feat or whatever. And so, yeah, you can have them die in an ambiguous way. I mean, that's such a great trope of like the person that you thought you killed all of a sudden coming back. And so if you leave some ambiguity narratively and like they fall off a cliff into a river, or you know, you can get creative with it, but doing something like that will make it to where when they eventually return, it'll be a dun 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 instead of a, oh, you had them just escape. Also, giving your villains the tools they need to escape if you are really concerned about it before combat, instead of fudging dice rolls or fudging spell lists, because that's another thing that dungeon masters do. And, you know, if you have to, you have to. But like sticking teleport on a spell list where it wasn't before when combat started, you know, is a way to get your villain out of a sticky situation, but you are fudging your characters and your NPCs in the moment behind the screen. So instead of just sticking stuff on a monster's spell list or giving them spell casting in the moment altogether, when you're designing villains that you want to be able to get out of bad situations, plan ahead. And when you're designing them, give them teleport, give them expeditious retreat, give them those tools beforehand. And now all of a sudden you're not fudging, you're just designing your villains in a way that makes sense narratively for them, but then also gives you those get out of jail free cards. And, you know, if it's a spellcaster, obviously giving them spells. If it's not a spellcaster, then giving them some player character abilities, like allowing them to use dash as a bonus action, or allowing them to use disengage as a bonus action, to where they can disengage and take off running without taking opportunity attacks. Things like that can allow you to get your villains out of bad situations without the need to fudge things behind the screen at the table. The last reason you should never, ever, ever fudge behind the table, and this one kind of goes hand in hand with what I just said, is when your players outsmart you. This is something that came up in our Discord a couple days ago, where we were talking about campaign 1 of Eberron Renewed, the actual play podcast that I am the dungeon master for. I'll put a link down below if you want to go check it out. We're in campaign 2 of it, and I like it. But this is a story from campaign 1 of Eberron Renewed, where, you know, there was a really significant villain that I had big plans for long term in the campaign. They were supposed to be around for a very, very long time. And this was not even halfway through the campaign, to my recollection. And so this villain shows up, and one of my players, Philip, who's the game master for Kyber Shards here on the channel, he basically just... I don't want to say he outplayed me, because it's not an antagonistic thing. He made a very, very, very smart play on his turn, where essentially this figure came in through a portal, and Philip managed to position himself between the villain and the portal that they had opened up and dispelled the portal. So the villain was stuck there with them, which I was not expecting. And I was very much like, okay. And, you know, it would have been very easy for me to add some spells to that character's spell list, give them some additional tools, or just narratively hand wave a reason why they could escape. But Philip had a really great turn. He role played it really well. He had this great line about like, you and I may not maybe get out of here, but my friends will. Like, he had the action hero line, and it was too great of a moment that they, as a collective of players, had earned the right to take out that villain narratively and mechanically. And so it would have felt cheap if I would have like, well, you got me there, but I have bigger plans for this person, so I'm going to send them away. And, you know, I dealt with it. Like, I let them operate as the combat dictated. I didn't add anything to the villain's character sheet. I didn't fudge their hit points to make them last longer in combat. None of that. I just allowed things to play out as they were going to play out. And then when I went to go plan my next session, I was like, oh God, oh God, oh God, what do I do now? And I figured it out. And that's what you should do as a Dungeon Master. You should figure it out. So give me your thoughts down below. Do you agree with me that sometimes it's okay for Dungeon Masters to fudge their rolls, but there are better alternatives out there? Or do you think that Dungeon Masters should just never fudge their dice rolls at all? It breaks the integrity of the game, so on and so forth. Or do you think that the instances that I gave are good and there is a bit of a nuance around this discussion? Let me know down below. Be sure to like the video if you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you like the video, do all the things if you like the video. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been Eric, and I will see you next time.